Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. Live on the phone with me today, I have Stephen Warley in Boston, Massachusetts. Stephen is the co-host of the Unstuckable podcast, along with Chris Wilson. Stephen and Chris share daily inspiration and life-changing habits while they interview people who've gotten themselves unstuck, found their own path, and work on their own terms. They interview experts to discuss how to achieve the freedom you desire and the stability you crave. Stephen, thanks for joining me today.
Angela, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes, me too. You know, I really wanted to reach out. I mentioned to you before that I've been listening to your podcast, and I think the thing that's really interesting about it is that many of the people who come to me for career coaching themselves are feeling stuck. And whether it's in their career, their life, or something. And so I think it's just a really great opportunity to kind of discuss what it is that you're working on.
Yeah, I think what's so fascinating, as I was just before we jumped on, I was telling you a little bit about how we've gotten started. We launched our podcast on April 1st, and we've interviewed over 140 people so far.
Wow.
And what we've learned, and what is so fascinating, is if I could give a summary of what I think is making us a little different, or what is exciting me, at least, from what we're learning, is that there's these skills in life that most of us would agree are incredibly important, but they're never taught to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're uncovering on Unstuckable. You know, the idea that you should always have a learning goal, that you want to be tracking your finances and be putting money away constantly, that you should have some sort of awareness practice, whether that's prayer or meditation. You should be conscious of how you move your body. I mean, think about it, Angela. Most of us sit on our butts the majority of the day. I can't think of any greater example of us all feeling a little stuck.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And, you know, many of those skills that you're talking about, those life skills, those aren't taught in school often. They're things that you kind of have to pursue on your own, and yet they're so important to our day-to-day life.
Yeah, and there's really, in what we discovered, there's definitely a methodology behind each one of those skills and habits, how to learn it. And what we're also excited about is that there's lots of variations. We never want to say this is the only way to have awareness, or the only way to develop your writing habits so you can kind of track your progress. There's lots of different variations, and that's what we want to inspire people to do, is to find out, really ask those tough questions. How do you like to work? How do you like to learn? What is it that you really want to do in life? How do you want to spend your time? These are all these really important but hard questions to answer that many of us don't put enough time into wanting to explore or respond to.
Right. And you mentioned your podcast, but you also have an online community. Is that right?
Yeah, we just finally launched our private Facebook group, which we're really excited about, and that is blowing my mind. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're discovering when you really get into this, and people, we kind of started this journey as, we're hearing a lot of people feeling stuck. We want to find out what that means and how we can help them. And then in our online community, we're seeing how open people are, because I think we're attracting a group of people who they have nothing left to lose. Mm-hmm. Many of them are working, but many of them have a goal in mind of something they want to do, but they just don't know how to get it going, or they don't know how to find the time, or they know what they're doing right now is not what they want to be doing, but they still have no idea what they want to do. Right. And one of the habits we discovered, which is so important, when you want to make a big change in your life, you want to transform, you want to achieve a goal, it is so important to start hanging around with like-minded people who are living the change that you want to live, or doing what it is that you want to do. Because, Angela, our closest friends and family, our colleagues, have the best intentions, but many times they might not get that big idea, that big change, that big goal that we want to do. So we have to go and seek out people who do understand us a little better.
Oh, I totally agree. I work with a lot of clients who want to totally switch careers, or sometimes it's, they've had a high-powered career and they want to take a lower-paying job that they really enjoy and that has more meaning to them. And, I think when they make a big change like that, sometimes those people around them don't really quite understand what they're doing and they're a bit confused. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's basic human nature. We all want to belong to something. We want to be part of a tribe. And when you start not fitting in with your corporate job or that lifestyle, People, are going to kind of, in a way, and we've heard this in our interviews and people that we talk to, that you kind of feel rejected by this group of people that you spend so much time with. So that's why it's so important to be aware to build your new tribe before you exit the one that you're currently in.
I totally agree. I left my corporate job in 2012, and the first...
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. The first close friend that I told had a reaction I really didn't expect. He looked at me shocked, and he said, "But I used to admire you. You were the person that I aspired to be like. How could you do this to me?" And
I wanted to... But it's just funny to echo that. Even today, I just received a text message from my mom, and she doesn't know what I do. She goes, different ones ask me what I do, and I still can't figure it out. I really don't know. It's something to do with the internet. So I just read that, and I've been on this path for 14 years, and sometimes I think it's also frustrating because even somebody like your parents, your spouse, you really want to be understood by them. But sometimes you might not be, and that's okay. They still love you. They're going to be supportive for you in a different way in your life, but it shouldn't prevent you. If they don't get what it is that you want to do, I don't think you should be turned off by that or allow that to stop you from doing what you want to do.
No, I totally agree. So in terms of doing what you want to do, what is it that inspired you to start Unstuckable?
Well, I'll give you the short answer. I became a reluctant entrepreneur. I was laid off 14 years ago on election day. And it's taken me this long to finally get to Unstuckable. I've had a lot of great past businesses and opportunities, did very well. But when I really said, what is it I really want to do, in terms of spending my time and also being it financially supportive to my lifestyle, my wife's lifestyle. And this is what it is. I really, those first 5 years after being laid off, I felt stuck. That was the stuck phase of my career. And I really kind of came back to this idea after my last company I sold. It was an online sales training business for the broadcast industry. I said, you know what? I really want to help people around that idea. I don't want them to feel as stuck as I did for 5 years. And that there is a way to accelerate that process or bring awareness to it. But Angela, I think a lot of us there's a lot of people stuck out there that have no idea that they're even stuck. Because our economy is still going through such a major transformation that, the idea that I even think the idea of 9-to-5 jobs is going to be a quaint idea in my lifetime. I don't think that large organizations are going to continue to offer these well-paying, high-paying jobs. And I think we kind of got to go back to what has made America always amazing in that we can be a nation of entrepreneurs, that we can own our own businesses. And you don't have to go have a lot of debt and venture capital money. That's a big message. What we're talking about, people, that you can have a business that sustains how you want to live. It doesn't take that much. The cost of our lifestyle, my wife and I, is $55,000 a year. Now that's a little bit more probably for anybody listening in different parts of the country, but even when I make well above that amount of money, I don't spend it. It goes right to the bank.
Right.
That's the thing that we're trying to teach people, that a lot of times you peg your income, your spending is pegged to your income. When your income goes up, your spending goes up, and that is not what you want to do.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm trying to stop that.
No, that's excellent. It makes me think. I had a client who I helped him with negotiation, and we more than doubled his salary. And as soon as he got the new salary, and he was so excited, I just suddenly had this feeling of horror. And I sat down and said, it's like, keep in mind that you're not supposed to spend it all.
Right. Well, because my father worked for AT&T for 30 years, or maybe your parents had similar situations where they were a generation told that they were going to work for these corporations forever. Basically, they were going to be taken care of, health care, pensions, the whole 9 yards. And still, that mentality is still in the basis of our economy, of how we approach our careers. And I think that's what we're trying to inspire people to realize, that you can't just go to a company and say, hire me and tell me what to do and I'll get a steady paycheck. While that is awesome and it does reduce your stress level in a lot of different ways, I don't think that's reality. If you really want to live the life that you want to live, I do think entrepreneurship is that path. And there's lots of different ways to be an entrepreneur today. Not that you have to like go work 100-hour weeks or own a restaurant or as I was saying before, get a lot of debt to start a business. There's lots of different things that you can do. But it's more of that cottage industry. It's really how America started, that we all kind of took care of ourselves in our tight-knit communities. And I think I'm excited about that. I think that the web is bringing that about again.
Oh, I totally agree. So you kind of alluded a little bit to your own career path and sort of the steps that you took, but can you give me a little bit of an overview of sort of how you got to where you are today in terms of your career?
Sure. I always say I divide my career into 3 different phases. The first phase was the employee phase. I would say about a year after college, I got my first job in television. I worked for CBS News Sunday Morning, which was a great show, still is, and it was very exciting. But even in my early 20s, I saw the rungs falling off the ladder. And I spent about 5 years working as an employee for different media companies. And my last company that I was laid off from was a internet company, which during 2000, a lot of us got laid off during the dot-com bust.
Right.
And then the next 5 years, as I was saying, I was in that stuck phase where I was kind of trying to figure out, what was I going to do next? Because I wasn't getting a job right away in the media world. It was almost like there was a depression in the media industry in New York at that time. So I kind of went for all the traditional, I went to business school. I kept trying to apply jobs and that sort of thing. And then eventually I was kind of economically forced to take freelance jobs and started experimenting with entrepreneurship in that way. So then after 5 years, I ended up falling into the path of becoming an expert, explaining to local radio and television stations how they can make more money from digital advertising. So I became a speaker, a trainer. I ended up at my height, had my own online company called localbroadcastsales.com, where we had 35 trainers, 600 videos, where local radio and television sales reps could access that training at any time, and made about $500,000 a year at the height. And I sold that at the end of 2012 to one of my original trainers, because what I realized, while financially things were great, and I was kind of living on my own terms, I still wasn't exactly serving the community that really excited me.
Right.
What really excites me is that person that is on the cusp of saying, you know what, Stephen, I just know there's more for me out there. I don't feel like I'm working the way I could be most productive as an individual. I have this idea in my head, but I just don't know how to get there. That's the person that I really want to help and talk to, and that's what Chris and I, we're dedicating our lives to.
Oh, that's such a great story. And I totally agree with you. I think with career coaching, it's the same thing. You really get to help someone transform their life, and they come out and they're so grateful and so happy. And it gives you such a different feeling than when you were just generating revenue for a corporation. It's just different.
Yeah, I know it sounds corny, but truly, it's hard. I will admit that money does make life easier. I do feel more confident having the money saved behind me now than. But at the same token, what I've also learned to be sustainable, I just turned 40. I plan on working for another 30 or 40 years. It takes more than money to motivate me. And I need something that is meaningful, constructive, that I really feel like I'm adding something to society. So I knew for my own career, I had to find that. Otherwise, I was going to drive myself nuts and, become stressful.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think a lot of your listeners can probably really relate to that feeling of looking for something more.
Yeah, and I think what we're discovering, when a lot of times we feel stuck because we don't see options, we don't see other perspectives, and that's why a lot of people say, "Wow, you interview so many different types of people, all different age ranges, different careers," and we wanted to do that to build a story archive to show people that there's lots of different paths out there, there's lots of different ways of working, that people are inventing these new ways, and that's something that we want to keep adding to. Because when you're your own small social circle with your friends and family, and you get that, people like, why do you want to do this? You're never going to make money at that. And then it kind of erodes your confidence of why you ever want to pursue that opportunity. What we're trying to do is say you have to say, first understand that there's other options out there. Go seek them out, or at least you are, and we're trying to present them to people. And then you have to go hang out with those people. And then, because we're trying to find those habits that allow people to transform without them even realizing it. If you do that one thing for yourself, like if you're listening right now and you don't know what you want to do, you should start a writing habit. You have to get those thoughts out of your head and onto paper in your own handwriting. And I'm not a big fan of paper, but there's something about seeing something in your own handwriting. You can read it back to yourself. You put it in that physical form. And the next step is starting to hang around people that are doing the change that you want to do. And before you know it, you're on the beginning of a path towards something that you thought was never possible.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And, you're kind of getting into my next question, which is, you mentioned on some of your podcasts that being stuck can actually be a positive thing. And I know, when I work with clients, oftentimes they come in and they're stuck and it's very negative for them. I mean, sometimes they cry and they're definitely very down about it. Can you talk a little bit about the positives of being stuck?
Yeah, I mean, just first, I'll quick address why do we think it's negative? Because we think being stuck means a failure, right? It's a feeling of failure. It's also, I remember when I felt stuck for those 5 years, it's hard to communicate what you're going through because people want to hear, well, what are you going to do next? What job are you applying for?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to take care of yourself? It's really not encouraged to explore, self-exploration. It's not encouraged to go learn something, even if you might not be getting paid, or to take a lower-paying job so you can really take the time to find out what it is that you want to do. That is not encouraged in our society, and I think it should be because we're really doing a disservice to a lot of people. The positive it is when I think when you feel stuck is that means finally there's an alignment between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us are totally unaware of our feelings, myself included.
Mm-hmm.
I've really, in the last 10 years, learned to tap into my subconscious and my feelings, my emotions, and allow them a role in my decision-making process. Because oftentimes, your instincts know where you want to go and what you want to do. It just takes a while for your conscious mind to catch up, and a lot of times your conscious mind is fighting against that. So the folks, it's such a positive feeling when you're stuck because finally that conscious mind and subconscious are at an impasse. And you can't ignore, you can't suppress those feelings anymore, so you have to let them out and explore them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is the huge positive that when you're going through that moment, it's that you're on the cusp of finally doing or allowing yourself to do what you've always wanted to do, or at least find it, and not continue to have to live up to somebody else's ideal or do what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, I work with a lot of people who they're really focused on they're unhappy at work, but when you dig into it, you find out that their personal values and what they're pursuing at work are just really not very well aligned at all. And so sometimes there are sort of deeper issues, and I think that's kind of what you're alluding to is you need to be able to sort of align the different pieces of your life together in order to kind of find that purpose.
It is. I mean, something Chris, we had a call yesterday, I'm calling myself out for the next year. I tend to be a very highly motivated person. Like, if I tell somebody I'm going to do it, I'm going to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Almost to a fault sometimes, because then I put a lot of pressure on myself.
Mm-hmm.
Where I really need to shift is saying, well, what's a better way to build a scalable business, to really help more people is instead of kind of doing it for people, I have to really teach people. And this is an ongoing process. I mean, I think that's the thing about being aware. We're not saying that you're never going to be stuck again in your life, your career, but it's about bringing awareness that it's happening to you and that you can do something about it. And that's just an example that I feel like in the last year, I felt like I took on too much. I stressed myself out, but I know why it happened after a lot of thought about it. I have the awareness to do something about it, and now I'm going to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's great to always kind of review and set new goals and kind of reprioritize how you do things. I think that should be like an everyday sort of process.
And can I throw out a radical idea because you bring up the word goals? And I know we often talk about goals, and it's so important in the realm of transformation in your life. You have to have an idea of where you want to go. But I'm also a huge, huge believer in habits. Your life is the sum of habits.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make a big change, and then I work with you, and you keep telling me you have no time, but you're watching 3 hours of television today, I'm going to be like, well, I just found you some time.
Right.
And that's really what we look at productivity at Unstuckable. It's about aligning your habits with the goal that you want to achieve. So a lot of times I think people get over-focused on results. And I think sometimes you really have to practice the habit day in and day out, even if you don't see those results immediately, because it has to become second nature. Because you want to at least, what we want to guide people when they find their workflow, working on their own terms, really means honoring their own personal workflow of what it means to feel almost effortless, that they're naturally motivated, they're excited, that they almost need to stop themselves from working too much.
Right.
That's kind of what I'm always looking for, having that balance. And I think sometimes when we when we live and die by goals and results alone, that kind of those feelings of failure start creeping in. We're trying to, and sometimes a goal or a result, sometimes that is, unintentionally, it's a societal standard that we're trying to live up to. And what we're trying to inspire people is to say, you are unique and you have unique abilities, and you have to find your own way of being productive. It might not be what everybody else is doing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think sometimes when people go through this process, they feel kind of some stress or shame about feeling lost. I know you talk some about fumbling around in the fog and sort of the time that it takes, to go through this process. From what you've observed, how long does it usually take people to become unstuck, or how long should they give themselves?
It's such a great question. A lot of people want to know that. And, for what I've seen, the minimum is really 18 months. I would say more likely it's 2 to 2.5 years. And I think some people get caught off guard because I think we live in an immediate gratification culture in America. And I think sometimes there's a lot of quick wins of things that you can be doing. But the true, deep, intentional transformation that we're really trying to inspire people to do, it takes time. And you have to be around. It took me, I'm still on the journey, right? It hasn't ended for me. I'm still, I would say, I'm about 80% of where I really want to be, who I want to be in life. And it's taken me 14 years. Now, the other thing is, this is not a one-size-fits-all number that I'm throwing out there. I think what I want people to take away is that this is not saying, oh, I'm going to go to, listen to Angela and Stephen. I'm going to do everything that they told me to do inside of a month. My whole life is going to be magically transformed. Yeah, for a very small percentage of people, that probably could happen. But I think more often than not, it's going to take a longer time. This is about awareness. This is about intentionally. Every decision, everything, how you live your life is really taking a hard look at it and saying, is this really where I want to go? Or am I giving into pressure, external pressure that is drawing me away from my goal?
Right. And I think the thing too, the up to 2.5 years, I think it's just good to kind of give yourself, some kindness during that time as you're kind of figuring it out. Because I think a lot of people, especially in social situations, they don't like to talk about the fact that they feel lost or kind of what's going on. So they may not, even if your friends are going through something similar, they might not share it with you. So I think a lot of times people that are going through this process tend to kind of feel somewhat alone. So I like the fact that you say 2.5 years, because it's, it kind of, I think it gives people a little bit of a break mentally to say, wow, I guess I don't have to figure this out tomorrow.
Well, you have to deprogram yourself. You know what I mean? If you're listening right now, maybe you're 20, maybe you're 30, 40, 50, 60, think about, you've had years and decades of being told something of this is how to organize your life, how to manage your career. And now that economy that supported those assumptions is transforming. So it is going to take a while to deprogram and get yourself out of those habits and to align yourself to doing something that you want to do. And the people that do want to do that, myself included, Angela, yourself included, anybody that's in the last 10 years even started working for themselves, we're kind of the early adopters. We're still at the forefront of this transformation. I mean, this is going to be a while. And I think that's when you look at it at a big macro level, that even our economy is not changing overnight, but it is definitely changing. And what we expect, from the time I was born to the time I'm going to die, there's probably going to be a much different economy than I would say the economy my parents were born into and the economy that will be at the end of their lives.
Right. I totally agree. And, just speaking of jobs and kind of entrepreneurship in general, I work with a lot of people who come in, and when they're in this stuck place, they just would really like to quit their jobs. I mean, that would make them feel better, and then they can figure it out. I tend to discourage my own clients from doing this, and I agree. I've heard you on your podcast do the same thing. So could you share with our listeners what they could be doing rather than quitting their jobs to work toward their goal?
I think the traditional, this is what we want to broaden and redefine, because I think when you say the word entrepreneurship, it's a loaded word. People have a lot of preconceived notions of what that means. And I think a lot of people think, to be an entrepreneur, I have to up and quit my job to really show that I'm all in and I'm going to take out a second mortgage and max out my credit cards. Now, once again, there is a very, very, very small percentage of people who have used that approach and it worked for them. for most people, it's not going to.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to have a plan because Chris and I were just having a conversation. I think really the first step, or as Chris was even articulating in our most recent conversation, but really the first step to entrepreneurship is getting control of yourself. Because no one else now, when you go off to work, you're being told kind of what to do. You're being influenced by that culture. When you work for yourself or maybe a few other people, you're self-directed. So that's a whole different experience. So you have to start preparing yourself for that transformation, for that transition. So to start, a writing habit. Really understand what it is that you want. What are your strengths? Assess your skills. Really, understand what you like and don't like. And also, who do you want to work with? I think so often we forget that this is probably one of the most important parts of our income development process, or looking for a job, or starting our own business. We are never asked that. We're never encouraged to think about who do we want to work with. We think about the titles, the money, the benefits, the brand of the company, what I get to do there. But at the end of the day, you never really think about who do I want to work with all day, because that's another one of these things that we've learned in our journey, that's what sustains you, who you have to work with every day. Or one of our guests once said that people often choose a job for the money, and they often leave a job because of the people.
Yes, I just wrote an e-newsletter, I think, last week about that.
So I'm not an advocate of quitting your job unless you're in a very abusive situation that it's totally sending you into depression and totally stressing you out. Then I think you should be. But we like to encourage people to look at their job as that job is funding your transition. Use your job to fund your transition to, maybe there's even a couple of new skills that you could still learn at your job that are going to help you in the next phase of your career. So learn them. Have a viable plan B, or have a plan of what you're going to do, how you're going to get through that transition. Save money. And I think this is a great opportunity where, we've seen everybody listening right now could say how much money they made last year, Angela.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of them have no idea how much money they spent last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that's a really important number to understand, because that's the cost of your lifestyle. And if you don't know that number, it's almost like running your business without knowing how much money you're going to spend next year. You would never do that. So these are those types of skills that you have to kind of get control over as an individual, so that way you have these really solid life skills. So you're really making intentional, strategic decisions, not just for yourself, but for the future business or however it is that you want to work once you leave that job.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, many times if you were to just quit your job, it may take you 6 months to kind of figure out a new direction sometimes. And so
I know then you get desperate, because then you have to have
Right.
money coming in, and you're taking everything. So you're not acting very intentionally. You're being very reactive.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can, instead of taking up and quitting and then figuring out for 6 months or a year, a lot of times I've actually worked with people in this exact same situation. Like, listen, I think you should try to stay at this job for another year and just dramatically cut your expenses, save as much as you can, start working on your plan, start developing, carving out time to work on your side business and start developing it. That way, if you happen to even get laid off or fired in the next year, you'll be ready to go. You'll have a plan to put into action. Or when you are ready to quit, you will be able to do that on your own.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. It gives you so much more freedom to make decisions that you want to in the future that are positive, rather than, like you said, getting desperate and kind of going after whatever you can find. Because I think sometimes when you get in that place, you may end up stuck again, and you don't want to go backward.
And just from a financial perspective, we often advise, if you can, first get rid of all your credit card debt. And then number two, save a year's worth of money for exactly how you live. So once you know the cost of your lifestyle every single month, and I mean, and a lot of times people think that means the emergency fund, your basic needs are being covered. We're talking about how do you live your life exactly today, including going out to restaurants, taking trips, whatever your vices are that you spend money on. What does that cost? And save that amount of money, because that will give you amazing confidence to make any decision after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been fortunate enough now to save a 10-year, we call it a runway, a 10-year runway. That way, Terry and I, we don't have to work for 10 years if we didn't want to. Of course, both of us love working, and we want to contribute. But it gives me the confidence to build Unstuckable in the way that I know that we can build it. It gives us the time to do it. It's much different than if Chris and I had to make money right away. We would have to make very different decisions.
Right. That's so exciting. I mean, that's just so much freedom to really explore what it is that you really like and enjoy.
And at the same time, we are giving ourselves loose deadlines. I mean, because you don't want to just kind of like let this go on forever, because you do want to we're constantly checking in. Where are we going? Why are we doing this? Should we let go of that? We're definitely in a phase now where in order for Unstuckable to be successful over the long term, it has to be financially viable, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a business.
Right.
If it's not financially viable, we're not going to be able to help more people. So that has to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's the phase that we're going through right now.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I see with a lot of folks who are in transition is that they're switching to really new industries or totally different roles because they're looking for something, very different than what they're doing today. Do you see any common trends between people who are making, huge transitions like that?
I would say those are the people who identify themselves with their goal and their skills. Many of us, when we're in our career path, identify ourselves by our job titles, by the name of the industry that we've been working for, even that company. And that is not, that really limits your opportunity. A lot of the times I'll have people go through an exercise where I ask them to list all of their skills, the ones that come right off the top of their head, and the ones that were people even complimented about, being like, you're always so good at making connections between people. That's a skill. Mm-hmm. And I also ask them to write down skills in their personal life. Are you good at cooking? Are you good at fixing something? I mean, really write down all your skills. Because when you start identifying yourself by your skills, especially in an economy that's transforming, and you want to make a transformation in your life, you can start mixing and matching those skills in different ways so you can see new opportunities that you previously never saw before. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think about an example of that.
I know I had a client recently who he was working in education and wanted to move into corporate. And as we talked about what he was doing in his personal life, I found that he was doing some different sort of real estate sales. And previously he had worked, he had some sort of hotel experience. And so Hilton actually has one of their headquarters here in Memphis, where I'm located, and he was able to transition from working at a university in administration to working in corporate strategy at a hotel, just because he'd had these little side projects, and we were able to kind of identify what some of those skills were that he could bring both from his current job and then also, from sort of his personal life. And I think those are things that we don't always think about because in our head we work for a school and that's who we are.
Right, and it's kind of and when you think about it, you're kind of living up to somebody else's expectations of what that means. Mm-hmm. So as another education example, we interviewed Zach Sexton from Asian Efficiency, the productivity website, where he was a teacher. And now it's like he's a teacher again because he's teaching people about productivity, having to be expressing that in a different way. One of my favorite interviews was a woman who's just working for herself now. She does underwater photography design, where she loves design. She loved graphic design, scuba diving, and photography. And she merged all these different interests together to start her own business, where she traveled all over the country, doing dives in all different types of bodies of water, taking photos. And she sells these photos. She actually sells them to local kind of ferry operators who want, different images of photos for their marketing materials. But she was able, because I think a lot of people also struggle with how they have so many, some people have so many different passions or goals that they often struggle. How do I integrate them? Because they look at them as competing priorities. Mm-hmm. When this is another way of looking at your skills of how can they all work together toward a unique opportunity. And this is Jennifer Idle, by the way, if you want to check out that interview at Unstuckable.co. Mm-hmm. And she did. And that's another interesting way of, looking at your skills. And I think that's where people have to start. Those are the people that can successfully transition themselves between industry and between jobs or ways of working from employee to entrepreneur.
That's so interesting because I'm sure that you said her name is Jennifer, right?
Jennifer Idle.
Okay, Jennifer Idle. I'm sure she's created a situation where she is providing a service that's incredibly unique by, pairing all these different things together. And that's amazing. I mean, it's great, but you really have to be willing to think outside of the box and be somewhat flexible about who you are as a person in order to, I think, see those possibilities.
And what you're naturally motivated to do. I love creating content. That might not be something for everyone. And this is what I'm naturally motivated to do every single day, in the way that I want to help somebody get unstuck. You do a lot of one-on-one coaching. That's something I'm not as interested in.
Right.
I don't think that's just not the way I want to, how I think I'm best at expressing myself in terms of inspiring people to get unstuck. So what's really neat about that, when you kind of have that mindset, you start to see far more opportunities and opportunities that better match who you are and how you really want to work, and realize that this is kind of an abundance mentality. There's lots of different ways. Even in the space that you and I are working in, you have your place and we have our place, and we work together, right?
Right, absolutely. So as you see people who are making these really big career jumps and career transitions, is there anything that you think people should kind of anticipate or expect when they're actually making the transition?
I think we've alluded to it. It's like nothing happens overnight. There are no overnight successes. When you think of Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears, they were performing at the time when they were little kids. They weren't overnight successes in the way that the media says. I think bring awareness that anytime you hear somebody has an overnight success in the media, go and dig in. And what you find out that these people were super passionate about whatever it is that they were doing, and they were doing it for years. So that's one thing. The other thing is you're going to have ups and downs, as we were talking about, even income throughout your career. And I think the traditional mindset of a career management is my income is always going to go up until I decide I'm going to retire or I'm done working. Well, that's not reality. That's not a real economy. A real economy is that you have lots of ups and downs, but you have to save in the good years so that way you can get through the leaner years.
Right.
And that is more of a real economic situation of income development. So I think people need to prepare themselves for that, because that is actual reality. And I think you're also, Chris and I have discovered that to be a successful entrepreneur, it is really a journey of self-development. Whether you even knew that you had issues and things to deal with, you're going to go through that process. They're going to come out. And I think that's exciting. And you'll actually realize that there's a lot of things that frustrated you or angered you or stressed you out, that this process, allow yourself to go through that process. You finally get to deal with that crap. Let it go. So that way you can not only be a better or more effective entrepreneur, but be a better person and be happy.
I totally agree. I think that's great advice. And I think, one big thing that many folks struggle with as they're going through this process is deciding whether they should, take another corporate job or another, job where they're working for someone, whether it's in corporate, nonprofit, or whatever, or going out sort of on their own and becoming sort of an entrepreneur or somewhere, in between. How do you find, what do you think that people should go through the process? What does it look like to pick between, corporate and entrepreneurship?
Well, you really have to understand that assessment. What are your skills? What are your strengths? Who do you want to work with? How do you want to spend your time? What's your risk level? Are you a big risk taker? Are you generally averse to risk in most parts of your life? You have to look at that mix of things. If you're really risk averse, it might still be better where we have examples of, we interviewed Reagan Starr, James Sheridan, Carolyn Jasinski, great examples of people who created their own jobs. They're all employees, but they were really good about understanding their goals, their strengths, their risks. So that way they went out and sought out companies that were the best fit for them. They didn't apply for jobs. They approached companies, had conversations with them, and said, wow, you will be a great fit for us, and they created a job for them. So that is one thing. The other thing, I think, we interviewed Andrea Canidio. He's an economics professor at the Central European University in Budapest. And he has research that he came across that shows that when you actually have an entrepreneurial project on your resume, or that you spent time trying to start your own business, when you actually go back to the job market, even if it didn't work out, that business failed, you actually get a bump in salary, because it's perceived that you are a risk taker, that you are somebody who's self-motivated, self-directed, that you are thinking about all the different parts of how a business works, even if you are, applying for a job where you're going to be in a specific role again. So it actually turns out that it might, and nothing has to be forever. If it doesn't work out, you can always get a job again, right? So it turns out it's a positive, even if it's a failure.
No, I totally agree. I think a lot of corporations today love working with people who are entrepreneurial, because they can think outside of that, corporate structure and the way that we've always done things, and they can look to make things more efficient or come up with new creative answers. And so I think sometimes we discount how much entrepreneurship can actually help us to grow our career.
Absolutely, it's that because it's a mindset, right? It's a way of being. I think a lot of times the typical corporate mentality is, I'm hired to do a specific job. They're gonna tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us don't like that approach. We want to be creative. And I think a lot of companies, because the economy is changing so quickly, they want a savvy corporation today, want people who can think on their feet and take advantage of opportunities more quickly, because the days of running it up the chain of command and having it take 2 years are over. Things just change too quickly now.
Mm-hmm. And, you've kind of alluded to something a couple of times, which I find interesting, which is occasionally I'll have people talk to me and they'll say, my company isn't training me, or I'm upset because my company hasn't told me what to do. And I think even when you work in corporate, taking that entrepreneurial perspective and thinking, what can I do to learn more? What direction should I be going in? And trying to make your own choices and your own decisions, whether or not the company is there to train you, continuing to move forward on your own, I think is important.
I totally agree. And it's a question I'm starting to ask people, because I think a lot of us, when I ask somebody, has anybody ever asked you how you like to learn? Most people say no, nobody's ever asked me that.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, even it goes back to how we were educated in the school system, that you go to school and you're told what to do, when your homework is, what subject you have to take, when you have to show up for classes, everything's done for you. And it's not encouraged to think for yourself. So what I now encourage people to do is don't wait for your company to tell you what you need to learn. And even if you've finished a PhD program, learning doesn't end once you've left formal education.
Mm-hmm.
You should constantly have a learning goal, an annual learning goal, maybe a monthly learning goal, quarterly learning goal. And it doesn't always have to be directly related to work. Like right now, I'm teaching myself Portuguese using Duolingo, the little app on my phone, because I just want to learn it. What the heck? So there's always, because you want to have a learning mentality. If you always are open to learning and you have that learning habit, that is what is always going to naturally help you acquire new skills, see new opportunities. And I think that's kind of the genesis of what makes someone unstuckable, is that they're always going to be moving forward and they're not going to be left in a deep hole. And I think a lot of people who are deeply stuck, I often find those are the people who stop learning. And it's just not an option anymore in today's economy.
Right. Well, for those folks who are stuck and are really searching for their ideal dream job, what thoughts do you have about that? Do you think a dream job exists?
Well, because I appreciate you're an avid listener. So Chris and I have a kind of a radical perspective on the dream job. We don't believe they exist. Let me give you an example of that. You just got hired for your dream job by this boss that you know you're going to love working with. 3 months later, they leave. And a new person is in there who doesn't get you, totally out of alignment. Your dream job's over.
Mm-hmm.
So there's too many variables that are constantly changing every single day for you to say, finally, I got all the exact variables to line up, and this is my dream job. To expect that to stay like that for as long as you want is naive. A better way to look at it is that you're looking for your dream flow of how you like to work, and having an awareness to look for different aspects to bring yourself in alignment with individuals you want to work with, projects you want to work on, companies you want to be working with. So that's where we're trying to guide people, that even if you're in a lot of times I talk to people who are so ready to quit, and after talking with them, I kind of help them realize how this job could help them in the next phase, or maybe it's not as bad as they thought. It's a lot of times it's just changing perspectives and mindsets that can make a job that you don't like better, or you could also be setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment if you were on that quest for a dream job. I think they exist in moments in time, but I don't think they're permanent.
Absolutely.
And I do not mean to say that and it sound like, wow, that's pessimistic. Not my intention at all. What I want you to do is to have a dream workflow every single day, and you get to control that, and you're in charge of it. And that is what we want to inspire people when we talk about working on your terms to do.
No, I totally agree. And I like the example that you gave about, you take this dream job and then your boss quits. In 2007, I took my dream job as director of digital strategy for a company here in Memphis. And literally on my second day, the awesome guy who hired me quit.
Right, and then your dream job just disappeared with them, right?
I mean, well, luckily it still was for me, my dream job. But ironically, my team didn't have a manager for over, I think, like a year and a half. But luckily I'm very self-motivated, so it wasn't a huge problem. But I do remember thinking, oh my God, this was the guy I wanted to work for. And I guess he, was waiting until I came on board to announce his departure. And so literally he brought me in on my second day, sat me down in his office and said, I just want to let you know that I'm going to be leaving.
Because I think a lot of times we put too much emphasis on other individuals for our own happiness, where it really has to come internally, and we have to look at it from that perspective, in those eyes, because you're giving your power away if you think that you're just on the quest to find a dream job. And the second one of those little variables is out of sync, and it's going to turn that dream job into a potential nightmare for you. That you're just going to disappoint yourself.
Absolutely. Well, is there any other advice that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, we would love, because one of our habits is all about hanging out with like-minded people, and we've recently opened a private Facebook community. We would love for people to come on over and join that. So that way, if you feel like you're alone, or those around you don't understand what you want to do, or you just need some accountability to take action toward your goals, love to have you join our community. You can go to unstuckable.co. When you join Unstuckable, we'll send you a link to that Facebook group. But one other takeaway: if you have no idea what you want to do, start some sort of writing habit. We have lots of resources on our website about that, so you can go listen to some other interviews. And number two, if you do know what you want to do, you got to go start hanging around with like-minded people. So those are the two first basic habits. Whichever one of those that you fall into will help you start building momentum toward transforming your life in the way that you want to live it.
Great. And so people can go to unstuckable.co and sign up for your private Facebook community. And then they can also, where can they go to listen to your podcast?
Yeah, they can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher, and they can also listen to it at unstuckable.co.
Cool. Great. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for joining me.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah,
and let's get unstuck.
Yes, exactly. Well, the discussion's been very helpful. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes so that you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed the program today, please consider leaving a review.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.